Because we decide. It is our decision on who, we make the rules on who can join. Now, the join is that you can become part of.
Hold up. Stop the tape right there. If you watched the recent debate on the Dr. Dav show, you witnessed highly intelligent people completely gridlocked because they are trying to bridge a gap using the wrong tools. They are debating over theological titles, language translations, and modern religious policies. The rabbinic panelist stands there at the 19-minute mark and boldly tells the room, it's our decision on who. We make the rules on who can join because we decide. But through a strict forensic audit, we don't look at the policy updates of the board of directors. We examine the primary historical and biological record. Today, we are diving into the absolute core of the scriptural record, the Messiah versus the converted elites and rabbinic sages. Because the identical corporate gatekeeping you saw on that panel is the exact same synthetic system the Messiah walked into the Levant to systematically dismantle. Let's unseal the ledger. To understand why the Messiah is slandered amongst this religious cult, you have to rip off the sanitized Sunday school postcard version of 1st century Judea and look at the raw geopolitical crime scene. Quick disclaimer, before we move forward in the audit, if you have not seen the previous audit, you will not understand why these groups are labeled with certain haplogroup labels. To have a more contextual understanding, pause this audit and click the forbidden truth about your DNA audit to get properly informed.
That is why we need to help determine it, because that was our responsibility after Sinai. So when Ruth said what she said, she made a decision, I made a decision, because my family was returning, so we had to go through a similar process as converts, right? Even though we did not convert because we already had Jewish ethnicity, we had to make sure it was in alignment with Halakha, and a rabbi had to sign off on that and say, you have been a part of the Jewish people, and you have halakhically returned to be a part of the Jewish people. It is our responsibility to safeguard the faith, to safeguard the tradition.
Okay, so you can convert, but that won't make you a part of God's chosen people according to what I read. There have always been converts, and one of the first was Antipater the Idumean. And from his line, we got who that? Well,
Wait, you gotta give me a prompt on who
Allow me to elaborate.
I love talking to Hebrew Israelites. Y'all have some stuff.
Well, Antipater the Idumean, historically, world history says that Antipater the Idumean was the king or the lead over Judea, and he was given the kingship over Judea by Caesar, by Julius Caesar. Okay. Right, so from his line, we got, he was a king over Judea, I mean, he wasn't a Jew, right? But he was given the area because Julius Caesar conquered the area.
So colonization.
Right?
Colonization.
Something like that, right? So from his line, we get King Herod. Right. So later on in the Newer Testament, when Christ was being born, Herod was saying, "Go and kill all of the kids under 2," because he was looking for. He wasn't an Israelite man, but he was a king over the Israelites.
But
then later on, well, he would have been a convert because he came from the line of Antipater the Idumean, and Idumeans are the children of Esau, right? And Esau was not given the blessing. Right. So we have Antipater, we have Herod, and then later on we have King Agrippa in the Newer Testament that Paul addressed, and he said, I know you to be expert in all of the customs concerning the Jews. He knew that he was not a Jew, but he was expert in the customs because there's always been a school for people to learn who wanted to learn. You can learn, you should learn, because ultimately when Christ returns, everyone will be keeping the commandments. everybody's going to convert, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be, you converting, you understanding what you ought to do doesn't mean that you are a part of the chosen people.
When the Messiah was walking the soil of the Levant, the people sitting in the luxury boutiques of power were not the genuine, humble, indigenous seeds of the houses of David or Aaron. The throne was held by the Herodian Dynasty, literal E1b1b Idumean Edomite converts, who had been handed a synthetic political deed over Judea by the R1b Japhetic iron of Julius Caesar and the Roman Senate. The priesthood was corrupted. The office of high priest were being bought, sold, and appointed by Roman governors. This is the historical background the modern rabbinic structure desperately tries to redact by rejecting the Apocrypha and the New Testament. Why is this, you ask? Because those books document their mass conversion periods, from the forced Hasmonean conversions of the Idumeans to the Roman vetted political puppets wearing the garments of Levi. The true oppressed Israelites were the underclass, and the Messiah's assignment was highly specific. When he said in Matthew 15:24, "I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel," he was an operative sent into a compromised, occupied zone to execute a targeted rescue mission for an oppressed nation living under the boot of an integrated, converted elite. He explicitly warned his true disciples to watch out for this class collaboration, telling them in Mark 8:15, "Take heed, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and of the leaven of Herod." The leaven of Herod was the political compromise, taking the clean laws of the Creator and blending them with Roman imperialism and Edomite administrative control.
If, by definition, and I'm going to say I agree, that you have a Messiah operating as the Word made flesh, and you're using the Word to then confirm who he is and what he does, then also, along with all of those scriptures that give an idea of how he's supposed to show up, then also him being lawful has to be a reality. And so why I put a thumbs up to the question is, I believe in a lawful Mashiach, but a Mashiach that teaches lawlessness or gives people the right to think that they can operate in lawlessness is a large deviation, not only from Torah, but from even what is said throughout the New Testament.
But a Mashiach that teaches lawlessness or gives people the right to think that they can operate in lawlessness,
is a large deviation, not only from Torah, but from even what is said throughout the New Testament.
There's also context that comes with that.
When it comes to this specific religious cult and their oral traditions, they twist and spin the narrative that the Messiah was lawless and against Torah.
There's also context that comes with that.
When actually it was the other way around. Let's dive deeper into their deception.
There's also context that comes with that.
When the Messiah arrived on the scene, his primary conflict was never with the written Torah. It was a direct cross-examination of what the panelist in the video calls Halakha, the oral law and traditions of the elders. He exposed it as a synthetic operating system designed to overwrite the baseline principles of the Creator.
There's also context that comes with that.
In Matthew chapter 23, verse 2, he exposed their hostile takeover of the judicial system, stating the scribes and Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. Think about that phrasing. Sitting in Moses' seat means they had seized the administrative machinery, they had the institutional control of the courtroom benches and the keys to the temple treasury, but they lacked the genetic and spiritual authority of the true line. He directly challenged their illegitimate man-made legal codes in Matthew 15:9, quoting the prophets, "But in vain they do worship me, teaching for doctrines of the commandments of man."
There's also context that comes with that.
And look how deep the pipeline goes. At the 1 hour, 28 minute, and 30-second marker, the panelist explains how they created maternal descent lines and community laws to define citizenship. 2,000 years ago, the Messiah completely audited that exact Proselyte Manufacturing Protocol. In Matthew 23:15, he declared, Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye compass sea and land to make one proselyte, and when he is made, ye make him twofold more the child of hell than yourselves.
There's also context that comes with that.
Forensically, this is how phylogenetic conflation was achieved. By manufacturing new citizens through man-made administrative decrees, they successfully flooded the record with foreign lines, drowning out the true paternal inheritance under a sea of synthetic conversion papers. The Messiah challenged their illegitimate authority, and that is exactly why their modern successors disown, slander, and label his records as idol worship. It's an act of institutional survival to defend an illegitimate deed.
Something beautiful to add to the belief system. The key is when we get away from who can and can't be saved and the distinction between what is required, we have a different requirement for what we need. Our requirement is to follow Torah. Our requirement is to be the people that keep Torah, preserve Torah. You ask, how do we know who the descendants of the ancient Israelites are? Because we're the preservers of Torah. That was our job, to know who the descendants of the ancient Israelites are, to know who the Jewish people are, to preserve those records, those documents. That's why we created systems to be able to identify who is Jewish by maternal descent and all of these other things, how you return. There are laws for how you return to the Jewish people when you've been distant, because you're right, there is no way to identify every single person who is Jewish, but that is why, like my family, our neshama knew before we knew genetically, and we returned in accordance with Halakha. There are laws.
The Messiah didn't just exchange polite words with these usurpers. His response to their institutional corruption was physical and violent. When he walked into the temple complex and saw it transformed into a high-stakes financial boutique, he didn't call it a committee meeting. John chapter 2 verse 15 records that he literally braided a whip of cords and drove them out of the sacred precinct, flipping over the tables of the money exchangers. He looked at the corrupt elites running the temple market and told them, "Take these things hence. Make not my father's house an house of merchandise." They had turned a house of prayer into a corporate money laundering syndicate. And it wasn't just the main temple in Jerusalem. He brought that exact same fire directly into their local synagogues. In Mark chapter 3, when he entered a synagogue on the Sabbath, the text notes that the religious elite were lurking in corners, watching him with malicious intent, looking for a legalistic loophole to accuse him under their oral traditions. The text records that the Messiah looked around at them with anger, being deeply grieved by the hardness of their hearts, and openly defied their hypocritical restrictions right in front of the congregation. He didn't bow to their synagogue rulers. He weaponized the true spirit of the Torah to completely humiliate their administrative guardrails, exposing them as spiritual wolves who care more about their corporate policies than the broken-hearted sheep of Israel.
He is undermining everything.
But to seize him now risks everything.
We have no choice. He must be stopped.
You sit on stolen ground, wearing robes of deceit. Know your place, rebel!
Now let's look at the absolute bottom line of this corporate board meeting. The ultimate reason they executed him was not a theological disagreement. It was a pure institutional panic. He was too influential. He was winning over the people, and his authority was actively breaking their absolute control over the population. Listen to the raw panic inside their own executive boardroom recorded in John 11:47-48. Then gathered the chief priests and the Pharisees, a council, and said,
"What do we do? For this man doeth many miracles. If we let him thus alone, all men will believe on him, and the Romans shall come and take away both our place and nation."
They didn't care about the truth. They cared about their place. They cared about their titles, their revenue streams, and their political deals with the Roman Empire. The Messiah influence was a direct threat to their entire corporate structure. And it goes deeper. They didn't just want to stop him. They wanted his inheritance. The Messiah exposed their exact criminal motive in a parable of the Wicked Vinedressers. He described how the husbandmen looked at the rightful lineage and plotted a hostile takeover. In Matthew 21:38, he says,
"But when the husbandmen saw the son, they said among themselves, 'This is the heir. Come, let us kill him, and let us seize on his inheritance.'"
Forensically, this was an inheritance heist. The converted Edomite and Roman vetted elites knew they held a synthetic deed. They knew they were sitting in a usurped seat. By executing the true Davidic heir, they believed they could permanently finalize the Onomastic Displacement, lock down the wealth of the temple, and secure an undisputed administrative monopoly over the history and identity of Israel.
Let's unseal the human ledger.
The final airtight proof that the Messiah knew exactly who these converts were is found in his sorting mechanism. He didn't use an administrative checklist. He used frequency. He stood in Solomon's porch, looked past their perfect Hebrew and their flawless institutional credentials, and delivered a devastating verdict. In John chapter 10, verse 26,
But ye believe not, because ye are not of my sheep, as I said unto you.
He didn't say their beliefs were wrong. He said their status was wrong. They were tone deaf to the Father's voice because they belonged to a completely different father node. When they tried to hide behind their pedigree screaming, Abraham is our father, he stripped the mask completely in John 8:44. Ye are of your father the devil, and the lust of your father ye will do. And he was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth. Connect the forensic dots. A murderer from the beginning. That is the exact multi-generational profile of the ancient brother rival Esau, whose documented bloodlust against Jacob culminated in the Edomites entering Jerusalem to slaughter the population as recorded by Josephus. And when that same integrated crowd in the Praetorium screamed, "His blood be on us and our children," they activated the legal penal codes of the covenant. They turned the ignition key on the 70 AD biological eviction. Exactly 40 years later, the traps of Deuteronomy 28 flared into a reality, physically driving the true seed into the four corners of the earth, leaving the geographic hub vacant for the ultimate identity theft.
I just want to respond to the fact that this prompt I'm kind of silent on, because that's when it distinctifies for me. We have to figure out who is biblical Israel then at that point. And I think that's where some people disagree. I think that's where I disagree with, I don't want to even say all of you ladies, because I haven't given you a personal opportunity to understand you. But from what I believe I disagree with is the fact that you say you are the Israelites that are biblically written of. But I understand that I believe you would be Edomites. So we have to look into
what? Hold on. I liked you up until when
she's cooking. And the reason why I say
you sit on stolen ground, wearing robes of deceit. Know your place, rebel.
The room gets dead silent at the marker of 1 hour, 14 minutes, and 48 seconds because the deep historical friction cannot be hidden. The modern rabbinic structure wants you to believe identity is a file that man reviews and signs off on in a boutique. But the read-only ledger written in your blood doesn't care about rabbinic consensus or synthetic papers. The corporate religious infrastructure can keep slandering the true line, but the SNP revolution is a forensic light in a dark room. The true scattered seed is waking up. They don't need an institutional gatekeeper to approve their citizenship. They are hearing the Father's voice, breaking the Roman Japhetic infrastructure, and reclaiming their place on the human tree. Stop auditing the label, audit the SNP, hit that subscribe button, join the audit team, and share this breakdown. The ledger is open, and the truth cannot be silenced. Ka'halaya basham Yahawashah Hamashayak Abba Barakayam Yasharala. Shalom.
And we won't have to cry no more. So that she killed it.